Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the number 108, 108. Now this is a very sacred number in Hinduism. If you're a Hindu, you already know that, this appears over and over in your life, But if you're a Westerner or if you come from another religion, the use of the number 108 in Hinduism is just everywhere. Okay, so how many times should we chant a specific mantra? It's always 108. How many times should we circle around a shrine? It's always 108. And this can be really, really frustrating because we don't understand why this number is recommended in this religion so many times. The entire system appears to be designed around 108. Not just religious stuff, like everything Indian is designed around this 108. For example, there are 108 karanas or transitions in Indian classical dance. There are 108 musical meters or talas in Indian classical music. If you ask a priest how many attendants or helpers does Lord Shiva have, he just expects you to know that it's 108. If you ask the priest how many sacred temples does Lord Vishnu have, he will just look at you and ask you, don't you know it is number 108? And this can be very frustrating when you're a kid. When you're a kid growing up as a Hindu, this can be very frustrating because they don't tell you why this number 108 is so important. I don't think anybody knows this. Now, if you ask mainstream experts, even mainstream religious experts, even the mainstream religious experts in Hinduism, if you ask what is the obsession with the number 108 in ancient times, they will simply come up with a shallow answer. Like they will usually say, well, all religions were obsessed with some number. For example, Christianity was obsessed with the number 3 because, the Trinity and all that stuff. And so a random number was picked in Hinduism and they, assigned various things to this number. Now, this is the typical explanation that you will get, but there are deeper meanings to this number. This is not a natural number, and the reason why 108 was used by ancient civilizations was no coincidence, because 108 is the basis of life itself. I know that's a big statement, but 108 is the basis of life. Without this number, without this 108, there's no life at all. Now, what do I mean by this? For example, if you're a healthy adult, you will breathe 108 times this many times during sunshine. You will breathe 108 multiplied by 100 times during sunshine. And you will breathe 108 times 100 during moonshine. So you will have 10,800 breaths during daytime, and you will have 10,800 breaths during nighttime. Now, this is prescribed in ancient Hindu practices. Okay, there's a particular sect called Tantric Hinduism, and if you look at that, they actually tell you that this is the exact number of times that human beings will breathe if they're very healthy. Now, but is this a mere coincidence? Could this be a mere coincidence? I'll tell you why ancient Hindus were doing this. For example, we're talking about sunshine and moonshine, right? So the basis of life comes from two gods. Now, this is the sun, right? So this is the sun, and this is the moon, okay? This is a crazy diagram. Okay, I'm showing sun and the moon, and you don't see anything wrong with this. But this is a crazy diagram, and only human beings can understand these figures as sun and moon. If an alien was observing this diagram from Mars, for example, he would be rolling on the floor laughing. You know why? Because the actual size of the moon would be like this, and the actual size of the sun would be like this. So technically, I should represent like this. This is the sun, and the dot is the moon. But why do we see them as the same size? And now this is special only for Earth. No other planet has this. We see them both as the same sized objects because of the number 108. Okay? The sun is 400 times larger than the moon. Okay, it's 400 times larger than the moon. But yet, have you ever observed a solar eclipse where there is the sun and then the moon comes in between, and the moon completely fits the sun? It's almost like they're perfectly aligned. How is this possible? It's because of this number 108. Now, what do I mean by this, right? Okay, so let's look at our solar system, and then let's look at a few things, right? One is this, there's a sun like this is the sun, and this is, let's say, the Earth's orbit. Nothing is drawn to scale, guys, okay, by the way. And please give me some slack because I'm doing it on the fly. I'm going to make some mistakes, and give me like a 2% error margin, okay? Please, okay? Because I'm just, thinking on the fly. There's no script here. So here's the sun, and here's the Earth, and there's this moon coming around, right? Now, this is really how they would both look. But from the Earth, they look the same. Why? Because the distance between Earth and sun, this distance divided by the diameter of the sun divided by this diameter is 108. Okay? And you may think, well, that's fine. That could be a coincidence. No, remember, we're talking about why the moon appears the same size as the sun. It appears the same because the distance between the Earth and moon and the diameter of the moon is also 108. Okay? So the distance between the Earth and the moon divided by the diameter of the moon is also 108. Now this is the only reason why we see both of them the same size. Okay? And this is the reason why we have 12 hours of sunshine and 12 hours of moonshine. Okay, so we have established that this ratio and this ratio. Now, I just want you to know that if you come back and say, no, this is like the current distance between Earth and Sun is, this ratio is 109, you would be right, okay? Because this is an elliptical orbit, and this number changes, fluctuates. But if you look at the mean value, that would be 108. And remember, I told you to give me a 2% error margin, okay? Because exact science is not exact science, okay? Now, we have established that 108 is an important number, right? 108, it's a freaky coincidence. If you're not a believer in God and all that stuff, this is a freaky coincidence to have. And this is the only reason why both these things appear the same size, okay? Otherwise, we would have to show it like this. But why is this important? Why do they have to appear the same size? The only reason life exists on Earth is because they're of the same size to us. because they're designed in a way that they appear the same size to us. This is the only reason that life exists on planet Earth. I know this is a big statement, but let me clarify that. Is sun really important for life? I don't think we can argue this point, okay? I think everybody would absolutely agree with me that sun is very important for life to exist. Without the sun, I mean, forget human beings and animals, even plants, most plants cannot exist. And then the sun has to be in this size, in this distance to us, in this ratio, which makes us lucky enough that we're not too hot or too cold, okay? So this is absolutely important that the sun is in this ratio, and it is the basis of life. Now, and you may say, well, what about the moon? We're going to talk about that, but let me clear this board. Now, is the moon really important for life to exist? What happens if the moon just vanishes one day? Would life no longer exist? The moon is very, very important for life to exist. Now, let's look at this. The moon takes about 28 days to go around the Earth, okay? So this is called a lunation. It's about approximately 28 days. A healthy woman would have the exact reproductive cycle as a moon, okay? And this is not a coincidence. If a woman gets pregnant, for example, she would deliver a baby after 28 into 10 times. Okay, so this is called a gestation period, the time period for which any animal, becomes pregnant and delivers a baby. From the, the conception to the deliverance, this time is 10 times the lunation period for humans, okay? And not just for humans, if you really look at all domestic animals, for example, a cow, that's 280 days, okay? It's the same as human beings. And, there are deeper implications to this, why the Hindus think the cow is sacred and all that stuff. But it also follows, the most important part that you should know is that it's very much dependent on the moon, okay? Dogs, for example, dogs and cats, it would be 28 times 2. It would be 56 days, okay? I know modern science will give you some random number like, like 48 to 64 days or something like that. But according to ancient Hinduism, these are the numbers. And these are still pretty accurate, okay? So you can understand the connection between the moon and reproduction. Now remember, without reproduction, no life can exist. And the moon is the basis of reproduction, okay? There is a reason why nightclubs are nightclubs, okay? Why they don't open during daytime. Now, is there scientific evidence to prove this? Now, scientists have tested some marine animals, like marine worms, for example, and when they stopped exposing them to moonlight, the worms just completely lost interest in mating. They wouldn't mate at all. So they would just, that entire species could just die if there's no moonlight. So there's actual evidence that without the moon, there is no life, there is no reproduction possible. Well, it could be possible for a short period of time, but over a longer period of time, life would not exist without the moon. I know that the moon plays a significant part, and it's not just because we have a moon, it's because the moon is of the certain size to Earth, and it's because it takes us 28 days. I've seen the moon play an important role in human reproductive cycle because to siddhars, who are saints as well as doctors, there would be patients coming who had problem with, irregular menstrual cycles. And the siddhars would prescribed that these women or girls should just sit under the moon on certain days, and it would regulate the moon or the moonlight or the moon's gravity or whatever it is. It would regulate their cycles to 28 days. So this is very interesting to understand, and I believe that we still have a long way to go in understanding why the moon affects, the reproductive cycles and the fertility, not only in human beings, but also in marine animals and all animals really, because otherwise you cannot have this kind of gestation period which follows the lunation period, the 28 days of going around the earth. Now, let's look at the moon in a totally different angle. Now we are looking at it in the perspective of how moon affects reproduction and fertility. But let's look at it purely from a physical point of view and see why this 108 is important, okay? Now, what happens if the moon just suddenly disappears? So here's the moon, right? And I told you about this 108. Now, what happens if the moon just suddenly disappears from the earth? Okay, the moon just one day you wake up, the moon is gone. What would happen? Now, first of all, human beings would become lunatics. Okay, interesting word because it comes from moon, luna. Okay, first of all, human beings would go crazy if the moon is gone, but that's a different story. Now, if the moon completely vanishes, the earth has an axial tilt. The earth is tilted at a certain angle, and this angle is the reason why we have all the seasons. And the moon controls this angle. If the moon disappeared one day, you know what would happen to the earth? The earth would not rotate like this. The earth is now at a tilted angle. You remember how the earth is always tilted in that table globe? Because it's tilted at this angle, and because of this angle we have all these seasons. And the moon controls this axial tilt. And if the moon just gone, and if the moon just disappears, the earth will not be like this. What will happen is that the earth will become like this, or the earth will become like this. Now, how do we know this, right? Is this just a weird story? No. Because Mercury, planet Mercury, and planet Venus have no moons at all. They don't have any moons at all. And one is at almost 0 degree, one is rotating at 0 degree, the other one is nearly at 180 degrees, nearly, okay? And the problem is they don't have any seasons at all. So if the moon vanishes, the earth would start rotating on sideways. You know what will happen if this happens? This means that the poles would become completely ice, and the equators would become completely desert. Okay, and not only that, if the earth moves sideways, you would have 6 months of daytime and 6 months of nighttime. This is how your 1 year would look. You would have 6 months of daytime and you would have 6 months of nighttime. And this is how important the moon, and the moon has to be in this particular size and distance to make sure the earth is like this, okay? Now, let's assume, and this is an important question to ask, right? Let's assume that the moon doesn't vanish, because we're not talking about whether we should have a moon or not. We're talking about the importance of 108 and why it's repeatedly being used in Hinduism. What if the moon does not follow this number. It just moves a little bit, right? Maybe 10%. Maybe the moon just shouldn't follow this 108 number. It should just come closer to the Earth 10%. Okay? Imagine that God becomes Jim Carrey in that movie Bruce Almighty where he pulls the moon closer. What would happen? Imagine you had the power to do it. You just pull the moon closer so you impress your girlfriend. Because remember, the moon affects the tides. If the moon just came 10% closer, there would be tsunamis everywhere. It would be a disaster. I know this works great on movies, right? But if the moon did not follow this 108 and it just went 10% closer, the Earth would completely have tsunamis all over, completely destroying the entire planet. Now, think about what that could do to the human body, because 80% of the human body is water. Okay, just think about it. I don't know, but I think the effect could be devastating. Now, what if the moon didn't come closer, but pushed farther? Okay? We don't have to follow this 108 ratio. Maybe the coming closer is not a good idea. But what about if the moon went a little bit farther out, right? What would happen? We're going to find out. Let me clear the board. Okay, so we realize that if the moon comes closer to the Earth, there would be tsunamis everywhere destroying, the planet. What would happen if the moon just was moved a little bit farther out, right? A little bit farther, maybe not that much, but just deviate 10% from this ratio, just 10% farther out. You know what would happen? The Earth would wobble like a top. The Earth would wobble like a spinning top. It would just wobble, okay? Now it's tilting at a certain angle and it's relatively steady. There is a little bit of wobble, but it's relatively steady. But if our moon goes farther out, it would start to wobble. It would just wobble at this angle and then this angle. And then you know what happens next? The polar ice would drift to the equator and then destroy everything. The ice from the poles would just drift to the equator, completely destroying the planet. This is a weird thing to say. Now, is there scientific evidence to back this up? This is exactly what happened in planet Mars. Okay, Mars has 2 moons. It's lucky. Just think about it. If you lived in Mars, it would be pretty cool because you would have 2 moons. Now, the problem is they're not following this 108 ratio. Okay, these are smaller, or the other way is to say this is these are a little bit farther out from the planet. And because of this distance, they're not able to regulate the axial tilt of Mars. The moons are not good enough because they're not following this ratio. So they're not able to regulate this axial tilt. So the Mars wobbles so much that it did happen. The ice actually drifted from the poles to the equator, destroying Mars. Okay? So this is why the moon has to follow 108 ratio. And the sun, I don't think this is a big argument because it's very simple to understand. The sun has to be at a certain size, at a certain distance from the Earth to make sure that the Earth is not too hot or too cold. So, and this is why 108 is such an important number. It's so important because if you deviate from this just 2%, there is no life. Okay? Not just human life, all life gets destroyed if this number is violated. This is why 108 is so important in Hinduism. But if you go deep into the hills of Sadhguru, I've seen Siddhas worship a strange lingam. The lingam has 5 facets. It looks like this. And it's like the normal public don't even know where this lingam is. It's in very remote places. It's almost inaccessible. They have a lingam. Now this is how you would see it. But if you go to the top, you would see it like this, because it has 5 facets. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has 5 sides. This is sometimes called a Panchamukha Linga. They just call it Panjalingam. And the beauty of this is that the angle between 2 sides would be 108 degrees. And this is considered a very sacred lingam. I've never seen this lingam being worshipped anywhere else. I've shown you so many types of lingams. I think I even showed you one with 16 sides. But of course I cannot photograph, these lingams. I mean, I cannot photograph the Siddhas, and that's a different story. But I've shown you the 16 faceted lingams, and I've shown you lingams with 4 sides, even maybe 8 sides. But this is a very, very sacred lingam with special powers. And the angle between them is 108. All pentagons. Okay? Sorry, my pentagon looks so bad, but all pentagons will have 108 between 2 sides. Now, is this why the pentagon in the United States is designed? Because of 108? Is this somehow related to aliens and UFOs? I don't know. You think about it, because I'm not going to get this video deleted from YouTube, at least for a while. We'll let that stay for like a couple of days. Okay. Now, let's look at the significance of the number 108. Is 1 to the power of 1 multiplied by 2 to the power of 2 multiplied by 3 to the power of 3. Okay, so this is 108. All right. Now you can tell right away that these are not just coincidences. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is a divine number. This is the number that designs everything. Okay, if you don't believe in God, if you just believe in nature, just think of this as the number of the nature. But this is the base. 108 is the basis of all life. Now, I know we have this golden ratio, right? Golden ratio and Fibonacci series, right? So there's this golden ratio. Is there a connection between golden ratio and 108? Yes. So the connection is 2 sine 108 by 2. That would give you the golden ratio. Okay? So you see how the 108 is connected to the sun, the moon, the golden ratio, and look at how it's being formed. Now, the most important thing is that 108 is employed in most Hindu temples. Today, archaeologists and historians are not looking into this aspect because they just think 108 is a random number now. Okay? But most ancient Hindu temples use 108 in their architecture. The temple in Tanjavur, for example, the Brihadiswara temple. The Brihadiswara temple in Tanjavur is 216 feet. That's 108 times 2. The Kokor temple, the Kokor pyramid in Cambodia, the original height, 108 feet. before the Lingam was destroyed. It's just 108 feet. Everything, all ancient structures were designed around this sacred number. Now, how was this designed? Now think about this. What are the odds that all these ratios align together? What are the odds that the ratio between the sun, the moon, and all these numbers have to be aligned naturally? Okay? And how can it be connected to the golden ratio? Is this all a mere coincidence? In Hinduism, 108 is broken down into... I hope you like this video. I am Praveen Mohan. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and also click on the bell button to get all the updates. Please give this video a thumbs up and do share it with your friends. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.